Welcome back. It's a cottage industry born out of a deadly epidemic. Sober houses, communal homes for addicts unregulated by state authorities. As you're about to hear, some have great reputations as safe places, bridges between licensed residential treatment centers and home. On the other hand, there are horror stories, especially on Florida's East Coast, unregulated operators lacking any professional training, sometimes ignoring rampant drug use by the addicts living there. And joining us for more on sober houses are Alan Tobiasen, owner of Purpose House Transitional Homes, Casey Collier, the clinical director of residential campus of First Step Addiction Recovery, and Melissa Larkin Skinner, chief executive officer at Centerstone of Florida. Thank you all for joining us. And this is an increasingly important topic because when you have crises like this, new things are born out of that. And we read about some of the abuses taking place, especially, we should say, in the West Palm Beach area. And I guess my first question, Alan, is why is there a problem, particularly on the East Coast of Florida? And I know there are problems, popping up around here.
Well, I think primarily due to the treatment facilities that are over there. There's over 14,000 treatment centers in America. It's really, Florida, I think, ranks as the fourth as far as alcohol and drug treatment centers. And it just seems to be a mecca. There's more treatment available over on that coast, and I think so the need and the demand is more over there than it is here.
All right, let's start educating all of us in terms of how this works. How do people get to sober houses? Do they start by being at First Step or Centerstone, and you need some kind of transition?
Most commonly they do. They've either been through an inpatient detoxification and maybe residential, and they may receive a referral from like their case manager or their therapist. But people also find out about sober homes from other people that they know, people that maybe they used with in the past, and they'll tell them about a particular home and talk about it.
Casey, I mean, I would imagine sober houses like the ones here in Sarasota and the one that Alan is involved with are important things. But do you get sometimes concerned when people are leaving First Step where they're going?
Absolutely. We spend a lot of time talking about the transition, what environment they're going into. We as a staff are familiar with the places. We use Alan's house a lot, and just trying to make sure they have the right structure and the staff that's going to give them what they need.
A lot of the problems we're talking about start with the profit motive. So, Alan, how do you pay the bills there?
Well, for me, this was first getting involved in the in really just kind of a calling on my life. I got involved at the Salvation Army, being a person coming out of recovery myself, having the experience of going through a transitional home in Colorado. I saw the value of it. What I experienced 6-7 years ago was the things that we deal with here in Sarasota: affordable housing, safe places to go. It's so critical for someone in recovery to have the stability and the safety that recovery homes can provide. I think that word halfway house is just such a broad term because it can mean so many different things. Today, we are calling ourselves a recovery residence. A halfway house can mean a lot of things.
That's people coming out of the criminal justice system.
Right.
But in terms of when we talk about the profit motive there, in terms of the places that are not that reputable,
right,
where is the money coming from to begin with?
Well, this is kind of new to me, what's actually been going on. I really learned about it 3 years ago at a town meeting over there, and it's really a lot of insurance fraud. There's patient brokering that's going on between the IOPs, which are the intensive outpatient providers, between the halfway houses. There's kickbacks. I'm amazed by it.
I want to get into that more in our next segment, but basically the insurance companies are paying for people to go to this kind of transition.
In our homes, we have no outside providers for finances. Our goal is to get them employed. Most of them come without jobs when they come out of treatment. Some do. But we have been very successful helping them find a job within the first 2 weeks.
Okay, we are just getting started with our discussion, and we'll pick it up right after we check on the weather. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are discussing sober houses and the industry that has emerged to treat those battling addiction. Our guests tonight are Alan Tobiasen, owner of Purpose House Transitional Homes, Casey Collier, Clinical Director of First Steps Residential Campus, and Melissa Larkin-Skinner, CEO of Centerstone. I want to go back to the issue of funding, which may be different in Sarasota than it is in other parts of the state. But in other parts of the state, how are these places that are unregulated making their money, Melissa?
So they develop relationships, they get partners that own lab companies, clinics, and then what they do is they engage in a kickback scheme. So these companies, they're medical companies, they will bill insurance, and then they'll give a kickback to the sober home.
There was a fascinating article in Politico entitled "The Heroin Crisis in Trump's Backyard," because after all, Mar-a-Lago is right around there, and it's really chilling. It says, unregulated, the operators, many of whom lack any professional training, either ignore the rampant drug use at their facilities or even supply their clients with heroin so they could funnel them to outpatient drug treatment centers in exchange for bribes. It is known as body brokering. And is part of the problem here that sober homes are not really regulated like Centerstone or First Step are?
Oh, I believe so. I think that as in any industry that there is going to be corruption, that there's going to be evil, that there's going to be people who want to prey on the vulnerable, and people in early addiction are truly vulnerable. The need for regulation, Florida is making some steps towards that. I totally support the direction of Senate Bill 326 and getting these sober homes, halfway homes, certified and regulated. Yes, absolutely.
You know, I would imagine that First Step and Centerstone also agree with that. Is that enough, though?
It's a start, and I think it will be enough. And just to give you a little bit more information about that bill, it actually prevents us as licensed providers, the Department of Children and Families, who receive funding from the state to refer to any sober home that is not certified. So that's a big deal.
Right, but one of the problems right now is we don't know how many sober homes there are out there and whether they're good or bad. I'll quote that Politico article again. Nobody knows how many sober homes there are out there because they don't need permits. That I would imagine is one issue. So, you know, can you guess how many of these places there are in Sarasota and Manatee counties?
I would say I can think of about 10 maybe in Sarasota off the top of my head.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
It's probably 8 to 10 in Manatee.
Yeah.
And as of right now, as we speak, there is no regulatory authority going there, checking the conditions, and making sure it's on the up and up?
That's correct.
Are there stories locally about places who are not doing what they should be doing?
I don't know of any recently, but I've known of some in the past, and what we tried to do was make sure the community was informed, not to ever refer people there. We never referred people there, so we kind of got the word out by word of mouth.
I would imagine that a lot of people and a lot of families who are in desperate situations, they go to places like that because there are no other alternatives. You know, Alan, you by your reputation, you run a great place, but there are just so many people that you could accommodate at one time.
That's true, and again, I think, you know, that having good resources available, especially in this epidemic right now, it's such a critical time that people get good, healthy care. It takes. We're about transitioning from a state of hopelessness to a life that's full and independent and
Happy.
Happy, yeah, happy, and there's just not enough facilities for that good ones.
You know, Congress right now is talking about one way or the other adding to the amount of money dedicated for the opioid crisis, which is facing every state in the entire country. So when things like that happen, you know, industries or causes become awash in cash, and it's very, very hard to watch all of it. We obviously need to do something about the opioid crisis, but is there any concern that that money will come into the system and the money will be there, but the regulation has not kept pace?
I don't know if money will come into the system for sober living. It might, so that's a possibility, in which case we all need to advocate at the state level for greater regulation. Money will come in. There are unscrupulous treatment centers too, and so money could potentially reach them. But usually with the state, they focus on treatment centers with good reputations when that kind of money comes down.
Casey, are there any areas of the state that are doing it right? Obviously this is really a big problem in the West Coast, the East Coast area of Florida. How can we not prevent it from it happening here? After all, we are also an epidemic of this crisis.
Absolutely. I think it takes the upstanding treatment providers in this area working together, communicating, like was mentioned a minute ago, communicating our experiences, sharing with the recovery community what we know, and just trying to work together, which we do a lot anyway, because that providing all those resources for our clients, wrapping those services around them is important.
I might add that the city of Sarasota, I can't speak for Manatee, but our police department, Department of Corrections, our judges, they're fantastic, and working with them has been great, and they're really taking this problem seriously. And they are connected to what is going on in the community, and I believe that they could gather that same information. How they would enforce that, I don't know.
That was my next question, because and I have covered the courts and drug arraignments, and I know that judges sometimes they know the go-to places.
Yes.
But when you have a situation where those places are not certified by any governmental body, that's where you could see problems starting.
I think that knowing the ones that they hear the bad information about, that they could probably enforce something, and I don't know from a legal how they would address that, whether it was through the police or complaints against
Or
the
code
bad
enforcement or something like that. Is there enough places to go when somebody is leaving First Step or Centerstone right now for that transition? You're both shaking your head.
No, there isn't. The demand, even on services, there's not enough services, and there definitely is not enough sober living environments, and people really need that to continue on their recovery journey. And so it's unfortunate that this has all happened, and it really gives people like Alan and his company a bad name, along with the other bad players. Yeah. And so then people hesitate, just like we can't refer to anybody even though we know they're good if they're not certified right now.
And Casey, where would that money come from? Because we often talk on this show that Florida ranks dead last in the country in terms of spending on mental health services.
Sure. The funding for sober living, for additional facilities, I think the regulation has to come first, because then that brings in folks that are doing it for the right reasons. There are many people in the recovery community. This is a big, a lot of people have a desire to get back and help people and give back to that recovery community. But it's the...
All right, let's just take a quick break, and when we return, we'll have final thoughts from our guests, plus what some of our viewers are saying about last night's topic, an 8-year wait for affordable housing in Venice. Welcome back. Treating addicts is critically important, but are there people out there taking advantage of the tragedy for profit, and what should we look for when seeking treatment for yourself or a loved one? Our guests join us right now for final thoughts. And listen, let's start with you. If you're in that terrible situation and you're leaving Centerstone, or you have a family member who is, what do you do?
Make sure you're going to a reputable place. Rely on a treatment center that's reputable. You got to do your homework. Make sure there's never been any fines or any kind of motions against them where they had to close down. Make sure there aren't any weird relationships that they have with other facilities. And so, for instance, I would give someone a list of all of the sober homes that I know are reputable, not just one. If people are recommending only one, then that's cause to be suspicious.
Casey, I would imagine the problem is that when people are in that position, they're often making these decisions with a proverbial gun to their head. And you're making these calls, and a lot of the places like Alan's place may not have beds available.
Sure, but I think the important thing is, we find beds in good places for our clients as they're leaving. Ask questions. That's what you're talking about. Do your homework. Asking questions about what the regulations are in the halfway house. Is there regular drug testing? Is there structure? Someone who's kind of monitoring what's going on. Those things will give you an indication of what kind of place it is.
Alan, you run one of the most reputable places in Sarasota County. What do you do in terms of drug testing and making sure that the people staying there are staying sober?
Random drug testing goes on all the time. I mean, that's just part of what we do. We're zero tolerance. So if somebody does relapse in one of our homes, what we want to do is to try to place them where they can get more help if they're, inclined to do that. So many times we'll refer them back to First Step. Hey, you need some help, some additional help.
And quickly, as this is becoming a bigger problem throughout the state, you do welcome the state getting involved in terms of new regulations in order to make sure that sober houses do what they're supposed to do.
I do. I believe without procedures and processes and certain parameters to operate under, that anything can go, and so yes, I do.
Thank you all for joining us tonight. But before we go, we want to share with you what some of our viewers are saying about last night's topic: an 8-year delay for affordable housing in Venice. In 2009, the city of Venice tore down the Grove Terrace community. For 30 years, it had served as a source of low-income housing for more than 400 residents. Those people were given vouchers and told a new 2-phase project would be built to replace it. In 2014, the first phase for senior residents was finally built. However, the second phase for families remains unbuilt. Venice says it's waiting to be chosen in a lottery for federal dollars, and we asked you what you thought of the situation. Matt Gilreath writes, they are building for baby boomers, not affordable housing. And Mary Apostolou writes, I believe there is still a serious need for low-cost senior housing in Venice. How does the proverb go? The worth of a civilization lies in how well they care for their aged. So Venice, how are we doing? And Vicki White writes, the problem that Venice is having is the same problem other jurisdictions are having, and that is that there is a need for housing that is affordable to lower wage families that is greater than the funding available. Well, what do you think about sober houses? Have you or someone you know been through the rehab program? Join the conversation on our tonight's topic by visiting our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. And FYI, you can watch past discussions. They're on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Thanks to all our guests for being here tonight. Alan Tobiasen is the owner of Purpose House Transitional Homes. Casey Collier is clinical director of First Step's residential campus. And Melissa Larkin Skinner is the CEO of Centerstone.